Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for joining the webinar. What we're going to do today, before even presenting ourselves or kind of like telling you a bit more about our companies and, of course, how to supercharge the customer journey, is a bit of housekeeping. So you feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinars. We'll keep some time at the end to answer them. So if there are things that you want to know more about or some clarifying question that you might have, just submit them. Follow us on Twitter, and you can also tweet during the session, so you see your both handles like Yieldify and Castora. Also cool places to learn more about both companies, what we have upcoming in terms of webinars, events, and latest insights. As always, we'll be recording the session, so you will be sent the recording of that session later on if you want to listen to it like twice, 3 times, as many times as you want. We find it so interesting. And of course, feel free to also email us either at Yieldify or at Castora for any further question that you might have. Great. So what we're going to cover today, we'll do a bit, as I was saying, of introduction about us. We will then dive in the topic of personalization and predictive analytics, the why. Why would you even be interested in those subjects? And then we'll talk a bit about strategies to supercharge your customer journeys with a lot of, I think, interesting case studies. So you can see what other people are doing and how they are, being the best in class when it comes to supercharging a customer journey. So myself, I am Lison Julien. I'm a customer strategy lead here at Castora. So I help our customers really, using our tool and kind of like supercharging their customer journeys with insights and, relevant segmentation. And I am joined today by Kat Miller from Yieldify.
Hey everyone, I'm Kat. I'm the Global Marketing Manager here at Yieldify. So I work really closely with our consultant team and our data team to find hopefully lots of interesting insights for things like the webinar today and all of our content as well. Cool, so first I think I'm just going to tell you guys a very brief introduction to Yieldify for those of you that aren't familiar. So you can see on the slide here just a few key stats about Yieldify. So we're a customer journey optimization company, and what we do is we help e-commerce companies quickly and easily grow their leads, conversions and revenue, and we do this by creating personalized customer journeys. We work with lots of great companies. You can see some of them on the screen there. And then if we just go to the next slide, how we actually do this is through a combination of data-driven service and technology. So we have our own customer journey sort of methodology, and we use all the data that we collect across all the different clients that we work with and all the journeys that we're building. And we use our platform to then help our clients deliver results. And now I'm just going to pass over to Lison, who's going to tell you a bit more about Castora.
Yes, so Castora, we have been around for about 7 years, and what we do is that we, at a high level, we are a cloud-based software that powers customer analytics for large retail brands. So what you see right now is kind of like our bragging slides of all of the very interesting and innovative brands that we get to work with. So what we do is that we get first-party data from all of these retailers. We push them through our cloud-based software, and we enrich the data of these retailers with predictive analytics. And then these predictive segments can go on to other platforms just like Yieldify and be actioned upon by the retailers. Great, so as we promised, we're gonna dive right in on the personalization and predictive analytics why. So we will be talking about the reasons why combining predictive analytics with your personalization strategy is so powerful. So what do we know about personalization? We know that basically right now there is a massive gap between the expectation of the customers and the retailers and the reality. So on the customer side, 83% of customers really want a personalized service from brands. This is the expectation nowadays. But at the same time, only 23% of them think that the retailers are actually doing a good job at personalizing. So obviously there is a gap there between the expectation of your customers and what is actually happening. On the other hand, we do see the same gap for retailers. I mean, 95% of them are clever people and they do know that personalization is a strategic priority that they should, try to achieve. But at the same time, 50% of them say that they have that personalized marketing fully implementing. So 85% of the retailer know that they are not really, there yet in terms of personalized content.
Cool, and then this is something that we're really seeing here as well at Yieldify. So we know that marketers really want to do personalization and they want to do it well, but it is a really big challenge, as we've seen from those stats that we just looked at. And we also know that customers really want personalization as well. So we actually did a survey at the end of last year, and we found in that survey that 63% of customers just expect personalization now. And this actually rises to 74% for millennials and 82% for millennials in the US. But there is a bit of a disconnect here as well. So only half of your consumers, so that 50% you see on your screen there, are actually willing to provide that data that you might need to create those personalized experiences. So it's really time for marketers to start to get smarter with the data that they have. And if we move on to our next stat, so we can see that 82% of customers have actually become more conscious of online privacy in the last year. So this is another reason why it's really important to make the most of the data you have, because if less of your customers are willing to share data with you and more of them are worried about things like privacy, it's going to be harder for you to kind of meet those expectations. So now I think we're just going to take a quick look at how personalization and predictive analytics can kind of combine to solve these challenges and help marketers get more from the data that they have. So Lisa, over to you.
Great. Yeah, so now that we are all convinced of this is what we need to do, how are we actually doing it? So the journey really starts with your different customers. And what you need to do first is just know your customer, know who they are. Maybe there are people who prefer to shop on a discount. Maybe there are people who don't need a discount. So this is something that you may want to know, and where predictive analytics can help you tease out which one of the customers are the one where you will really need to get that discount to generate a purchase, which one are not. Maybe your customer is somebody who is not, very hot in their journey with your brand. Maybe this is somebody who is at risk of churn. So same things, like you might want to know that and use predictive analytics to, before you lose that customer, kind of like get an alert and be like, this is somebody who you might need to cultivate at that point. And finally, another type of predictive analytics that is highly powerful and really helps you understand better your customer base and act upon that is customer lifetime value. So purely and simply knowing who is my best customer, in the next X amount of months, and who are the people who I really need to truly cultivate and make sure that they blossom into the true valuable customers that we expect them to be.
Great, and then where kind of personalization comes in. So you can see here on the screen, we've got like what we call a customer journey map. So we kind of help our clients understand how these different audiences are behaving on site, which points in the journey might need to be optimized. And then we do that by serving sort of personalized messages. You can see a few examples there on the screen as well. And then what that means is that you're creating these really personalized customer journeys that are going to meet the needs of your different visitor segments at the right point in their journey. So you can basically optimize the full journey with these sort of enriched data profiles that Custora creates, and just make sure that your personalization is really delivering on its promise.
Great. So I hope that we did convince you at this point of the webinar that the way to supercharge your customer journey is really going through what Kat and I just explained to you, that journey from predictive insights, predictive analytics to really clever personalized targeting on site, on email, etc. So now that we talked a bit about that, we just wanted to, take you through some of the strategies we've seen work very well for customers in terms of actually supercharging that customer journey and taking advantage of all the new tools that a marketer might have today.
Cool. So first up, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks. So yeah, first up, we're just going to talk a little bit about personas. I think we actually had a poll question for this one.
It's coming up in a little bit.
Yeah, spoiler alert. So, poll question coming.
Okay, so get ready with your answers to the poll when you see the question. But if we can just move on to the next slide. So a lot of marketers are already using personas. We can see here that 77% of marketers said they would be using personas by January of this year. And the idea of persona marketing, it's one that's been around for a very long time. But with the huge amounts of data that we now have available in the sort of digital world, it's really time to start thinking about how you can enrich those personas and make them work harder for you. So now I'm just going to hand over to Lisa, and he'll talk a little bit about how that might be.
Yeah, and first, as we said, we have a poll question. So before we even talk about, our own views around personas and what we find valuable there, we were just curious to know, what are you guys doing currently? So we know that marketers typically use personas. So the poll question, and you can answer through the webinar app, is which of the following ways do you build personas? A, are you right now building qualitative personas? Are you relying on demographics, psychographic, attitudinal criteria to build the personas and kind of like define who your customer is? B, are you relying more on quantitative personas, which will be more based on actual purchasing behaviors or product affinities? Are you using both, which is C, or are you using neither? Very interested to see what people are answering right now. So I think we have 8 seconds left on the poll, and then we'll be able to reveal the results to you. And that's it. So what is very interesting is that the winner of the poll is both. So it seems that you guys who are listening today are really savvy marketers who know how to really, mix the best of the qualitative and the quantitative. The second best score here is 18% for the quantitative, and then we have 14 for qualitative and 14 neither. So I really do think that what is very interesting here is that a lot of you guys use both, and at least it seems that a lot of people are using personas in one way or the other. So if we talk a bit more about what persona can be, I just wanted to dive in a bit in behavioral segmentation, because this is what we know and do at Costora, so we do have a point of view on what makes a good personas. What really makes good audiences to us is audiences that are first based on first-party data. So primarily purchase history, and we really think that getting all that wealth of data on your customer and knowing what they have done in the past is, sorry, we're having a bit of a technical problem here. Great. Sorry about that. Yeah, so first-party data, purchase data is really a very good predictor of what will happen in the future and how you might want to talk to your customers. So it's also a way to kind of like uncover a different type of data from the qualitative personas. Maybe two people who don't fit in the same, demographic or psychographic profile actually have very close shopping behavior for your brand. So the quantitative personas help you really uncover that insight and like maybe talk to these people in a way that makes sense based on their purchase history. This is not to say that qualitative personas are not interested, but they just fit different goals when it comes to a retailer. Like qualitative will help you be better at kind of like the creation of the content and knowing who you're talking to, and the quantitative personas can help you be better on the way of how you are talking to these different people. Things that we'll put in the mix of a good quantitative personas will be on different lines. So high CLV, is there a difference between your customers who are super valuable or not super valuable? Product affinity, can we maybe talk to them about the product that they are actually interested in based on internal lookalike modeling? And discount sensitivity is also a good thing to throw in your persona mix, because we live in a era of high discounts, so knowing who to talk to about promotions and who not to talk to about promotion is also a big win for retailers. And I will hand over to Kat for some actual example of personalization by CLV.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, I'm just going to talk through a few examples of how, once you've actually identified those different personas that you want to personalize for, what you can actually do with that information. So you can kind of use that data that you have about your visitors and combine it with various sort of targeting and triggering options on your website. And so that will really help you pinpoint your audience at the right moment in their customer journey. So for example, if we look at the three personas here, so these ones are kind of a more high CLV potential. And if we think about if they become inactive on your website, how might you re-engage them? You're going to want to personalize that message in different ways. So for example, for the luxe segment, which is the first one there, it might mean that you want to push them more towards new in full price merchandise, where for the premium persona, it might mean, highlighting an offer if they move to exit the site because you know that they're buying those higher value products anyway. Or for someone who's more into basics, it might just mean directing them to that category where we know that they are more likely to convert. Cool, and yeah, if we just move on then, we'll talk about personalizing by product affinity. So obviously with product affinity, it lends itself really well towards recommendations, and this can be a really powerful way to personalize the customer journey if you get it right. So for example, we work with quite a lot of clients in the beauty industry, and we find that recommendations that focus on really specific issues, for example, like particular skin concerns or anti-aging, it can work really well. And this is because the recommendations are obviously so relevant to the intent that the buyer is showing through the affinity that they have for the products. And so the example that we see here, Skin Iceland, they use recommendations to kind of be a bit consultative with their visitors. So they've showcased a complementary product, which is like an eye serum, and the CTA is simply to learn more. So really quite simple, but the impact was really significant just because it caught those visitors in that moment of interest. And it drove a 23% increase in conversion and a 14% increase in AOV. And then finally, if we just move on to talk about discount sensitivity. So when it comes to our segments, we're just going to take a little bit more of an in-depth look at this one, just because it is something that we've seen is really important for retailers. So if we move on to our first stat, so we can see that discount behavior today is really prevalent. More than 64% of online consumers will actually wait to buy things until they go on sale. And more than 59% of visitors are searching for promo codes before they'll buy anything online. And so we can see that promotions and discounts have really become the sort of new normal, as the retail space has become increasingly competitive, and as consumers have gained greater access to information on pricing, they've really come to expect these frequent discounts. And the important thing is that we're also seeing that this discount-led behavior, it's no longer just confined to a certain demographic segment. So for example, we saw a recent survey that found that US consumers earning over $100,000, they're just as likely to look for discounts as more thrifty buyers. So this again really underscores the point that Lisan was making earlier of using behavioral data to sort of enrich your personas rather than simply relying on demographic information. And so I'm going to just hand over to Lisan now, and she'll talk a bit more about the importance of this segment.
Yes, thanks, Kat. And as Kat was saying, I mean, promotions are becoming bigger and bigger and more of the daily life of a marketer. And that's really an issue because a McKinsey study showed that a decrease of just 1% in average prices brings down operating profits by 8%, with other factors remaining steady, which you can see is a very big problem if you end up having to have your site 30% off all the time. So this is really something that the retailers wants to tackle. And why they want to tackle it is because most retailers in the last years have actually entered what we call the discount spiral of doom, which is what you're seeing right now. So at first, what happens here, and this is also something you can find in our Discounts We Distrust book. What happens here is that it all starts, super well. So you offer a new discount to your customer and up you get a spike in conversions. I mean, this is a trick that everybody knows about, makes you feel good. You're always glad, to come back to your boss and say, hey, we've got a big, spike in conversion, but the margin and ROI are lower, but it's fine. You'll still have your conversion. So, you're still doing better. But then what happens is that sales dip again because first all of these customers that have purchased with the discounts are maybe not coming back, or they would have come back but they just got the discount, they bought what they needed to and they're off. Or maybe customers are going back on the site and they're like, well, I had a discount last time so I'm not buying now. So then you see another drop in your sales, which gets you into the panic state, at which point you're like, maybe I need another steep discount, and then you get that discount, sales temporarily spike back up, and then you're kind of like hypnotized by the discount spiral of doom, and you just have to go now through these cycles of spike of sales because of the discount, then things slow down again, then panic, and then let's give a discount again, and on and on and on. So really the purpose of discovering the customer's price sensitivity is to try to fight as much as we can that spiral of doom, because obviously none of us really want to go on it. Most of us have to go on it at some point or another. So how can we as much as possible get away from the spiral? So this is where identifying the customer discount sensitivity helps, because you can then at least identify who are the customers who didn't really need the discount and kind of like preserve them from that communication, and who are the ones who always need the discount and who you're happy to give it to because maybe they up their game in terms of frequency and then they purchase more. We've run some tests in the past and we did compare kind of like personalizing the discount for customers based on their propensity to be interested in discounts. And we found that sometimes, surprisingly, if you offer 15% off against 25% off to certain markets in your customer base, we will actually see a lift in revenue. So this is totally surprising and sometimes a bit counterintuitive, but there is big bucks to make by just being sure that you are not giving too much discount to everybody around. And I think this is where Yieldify can actually help you, make that vision come into life too.
Yeah, so I guess I would really just echo what you said there in terms of if you know that a visitor is price sensitive, then you still have a lot sort of in your arsenal before you reach for the discounts and enter that sort of discount spiral of doom. So first off, I would say something really simple that you can do is just highlight why they should buy from you. So this just means dispelling the idea that there are better offers out there, so you can promote your USPs. It might be something like a price guarantee, a free delivery, free returns, or simply just what makes you different as a brand. And similar to what Lisan was talking about, we've sort of A/B tested this with a lot of our clients, and we've seen that sometimes actually highlighting your USPs can be more effective than a discount. So that just really underscores the importance of actually testing when it comes to these different personalization tactics as well. And if we go to the next slide, another thing that you can do is sort of rely on the sort of psychological side of things. So something like urgency. There's a lot of ways that you can drive urgency. So you can use things like social proof, you can use countdown timers, you can use scarcity messaging. And again, I'd really recommend that you sort of test and learn to find out what works best for your different audiences. You can really learn a lot, especially around sort of peak trading periods where you've got a lot of traffic, so like around Black Friday or Christmas time. And they also lend themselves well to sort of the idea of a natural deadline that you can sort of inspire urgency around. So this example here that you can see, this is from one of our menswear retailers, and they wanted to just offer customers a discount around a special promotion that they were having, and they just really wanted to make the most of the traffic that they were driving to the site with this promotion. And so here we just used the countdown timer, which worked really well to drive that sense of urgency, and that achieved 117% conversion rate uplift across just 3 days. So you can see there's quite a big impact that can be made even in just a very short time. And then finally, again, if you are going to do discounts, then get smart about it. So as Lisa mentioned, test different sort of discount levels. In this example here from Domino's, we kind of tested 3 different discount tiers, and that resulted in a 16% uplift in conversion rate. And you're also not losing the margin by just giving away everything at one level of discount. And so in this case, it was based on basket value, but this could easily be combined with the data that Castora has, just to make sure that you're serving the right levels of discounts to the right visitors. Cool, so I think we're going to move on to our next section now. And this one is all about turning a one-time buyer into a repeat customer. So once a customer has made their first purchase with you, how likely is it that they're going to come back? So we can see here from the data on the slide that it's probably slightly better than your average. Data shows that a returning customer is around 27% more likely to make a purchase than a first-time customer. And so if you can successfully secure the second purchase, you're kind of well on your way to building a loyal customer. So as we increase after the second purchase, the likelihood of them returning actually goes up even further to 45%. And so the goal here is helping you move away from focusing totally on acquisition, and you can begin to then optimize your marketing to retain and profit from your existing customers. And in order to do this, we need to kind of look at how we can identify and engage those customers that have purchased once before. So first, we're just going to take a look at the customer lifecycle for a first-time buyer. So I'll hand over to Lisa, who can talk more about that.
Yeah, so really what we want to avoid here, we're looking at the life cycle. So we will have what we like to call members. So you're a prospect, we have your email, we're sending you some email, enticing it, and you become an active customer. You become someone who actually make a purchase with the brand. What we want to do here and make sure that is what happened, we want to keep you active, because that line of activation, as Kat was saying, is very important for making, next purchases. And it's really what I would like to call, it's kind of like the compounding line. If you can keep your customer on that line, the profit from it will really compound. A study from Bain a couple of years ago found that with just a 5% increase in retention, you can increase profit by 125%. So this is why we're talking about that compounding line of keep your customer happy and alive. And this is why you really want to make sure that your one-time buyer turns into a two-time buyer, a three-time buyer, etc. If not, and we'll talk a bit about that later, then you are at risk that your customer will take that secondary road that we're seeing here, which is really not where we want them to end up, which is actually not coming back and going from a customer who is cooling down, not feeling super hot about your brand anymore, to a customer who is totally lost, and where all of the good efforts you made at acquisition and at cultivation have kind of like, been in vain at that point.
Cool. So on this slide, obviously, once you've got someone to buy from you once, you're going to want to drive them back to your site again. And one thing that we've seen is really key is consistency. So whether you're driving them back via email, social, whatever channel you're using, it's really important to make sure that that messaging is carried through onto your website. So you need to really reflect whatever offer it is that you've managed to kind of draw them back in with, and reinforce it throughout their journey on the website. So you could do something like we see here, a sort of persistent reminder of the offer. So in this case, we've got free shipping, and that could even change sort of dynamically based on their behavior. So if they do actually qualify by adding enough items to their basket, that can give them some positive reinforcement then to go on and convert. And then the other thing that's really important with building loyal customers is building trust. So if we just move on to the next slide, we'll just take a look at one way you can do that. So being consistent is kind of really strongly linked with trust. 57% of consumers will actually just stop doing business with a brand who breaks their trust. So if you're going to get them to buy from you a second, third, fourth time, having this relationship is really important. And there's so many ways that you can sort of bring this to life on your website. It probably could fill in a whole nother webinar, but just one way is quite effective is to actually let your customers speak for you. So you can do this, again, lots of different ways. But so for example, here we've got user-generated content. So for example, if you've got a one-time buyer who's dwelling on a particular page on your website, maybe they're not 100% ready to buy, maybe they need some inspiration or convincing. A notification to move them towards sort of more inspirational content might be more appropriate at that point in their journey. And again, this is something we've kind of worked to implement across our different clients, especially where visual imagery is really important. So again, beauty, fashion, and also in like industries like travel, where you kind of want to see a lot more information about products and options available and really have that confidence in your decision to purchase. Cool. So once you've actually got a one-time buyer to make a second, third, fourth purchase, how can you make the journey better for these high-value customers? So once someone has become a repeat customer, you want to really ensure you're keeping them around. We can see here that this is a study that our data team looked at earlier this year, and we find that loyal customers, as you might expect, have the highest conversion rate, and in retail, that's actually 31% who will go on to buy. So obviously, this is much higher than your sort of average conversion rate that you would see on an e-commerce site, which sits kind of between 2 and 4% usually. So obviously, it's a good idea to get as many of these visitors as possible. So I guess the next thing is to identify them and then make sure that they're coming back. So Lisa, if you can let us know how you can actually find those customers.
Sure. So here, what you will really want to maybe start using is that whole concept of customer lifetime value. As Kat was saying, your loyal and best customers are going to be much more important to you than the rest of your customer base by far. So a way that you can start identifying them, and even from the onset, from their first purchase, is using customer lifetime value. So customer lifetime value is typically what I like to call RFM on steroids. So it's the same idea here. We're gonna, take a look at three main factors of what makes a customer valuable. We're gonna look at what is the size of their purchase, typically. How often do they come back? And are these customers even alive? So going back to that notion of activity that we talked a bit before. So we're going to take these three things that typically make your RFM, and where the steroid piece comes in is the whole AI contribution to that model. So what some CLV models like ours are capable of doing is taking these three factors and sprinkling on top of it some covariates, things that are kind of like signals, and that will help the AI categorizing your different customers between the ones that are the most valuable because they look like your valuable customers and the ones who maybe will not be so valuable. So really this is just, a very high level how CLV work, and how CLV will help you from the onset identify who is a valuable customer. And then once you've identified them, the name of the game, we think, is really going to be trying to increase the frequency. So I did say there are three factors that all compound in CLV. There is the size of the purchase, customers alive, what is the frequency. And what we found in a study last year is that frequency was actually the main driver of success for the successful retailers. So it was much more a factor than the basket size or any other variable in making a good customer. And we saw that for every 1% increase in order frequency, we had an almost 3% increase in revenue, which is really interesting for retailers. And so coming into a bit of an example, this is exactly how we actually helped Tiffany & Company making, the most out of their direct mail program. So they were really able to, improve the segmentation and rely on customer insights to build the messaging. So what they were able to do is really tease out who are my valuable customers, who are the customers to who I need to send these very expensive catalog mailers that are very effective with the right customers, and we're able to tell them, who these people are. And once they send the catalog to these customers instead of who they were sending it, typically they saw a 17% increase in revenue per recipient. So really knowing who your best customer is and targeting them and creating an experience for them in order to increase the frequency of their purchases is something that can be very, very valuable for a brand. And I believe that Kat has also more example on how you can supercharge that customer journey using CRM.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that we immediately think of when we think of a high value customer is a loyalty or VIP program. But one of the biggest challenges we see brands facing is actually driving membership of these programs. And we've seen a couple of high profile brands actually shut down their loyalty programs in recent years. So we've had, I think, ASOS close theirs last year. But if you do them right and you can drive enough members, they can be a really valuable way to provide that extra value to your loyal customers. And so what we've done to kind of boost signups is just show exactly what users are missing out on. So once you've identified those high value users, maybe post-purchase is actually a really great time to ask them to join the program, because you can show them, exactly how many points they would have got with that purchase. And if you don't already have their email address, you can obviously ask for that, or you can also start to build an even richer profile of them so that you can personalize even further. So maybe ask them, what are their favorite types of products, so that you can, use that information as part of making their experience better. And then once you've actually got someone to join the loyalty program, there's another challenge, of course. So that is actually getting customers to use it. So if we just move on to the next example, we've seen a lot of success with just making sure that the messaging is really personalized, and just to make sure that visitors are actually taking advantage of all the points that they've saved up. So in this example, you can actually see here, hair care brand Wedad, they really recognize these challenges with loyalty, especially in the beauty industry, which can be quite fickle. And so they looked at a lot of the metrics that Lisan was mentioning earlier. So they looked at repeat purchase rate, average purchase frequency, and from that they used it to create a personalized loyalty program. And this includes on-site messages, which are tailored based on visitor behavior. So for example, offering money off for VIP customers, or making this dependent on certain spend thresholds, or different offers to loyalty program members versus repeat customers and things like that. So that just really helps them ensure that, margin is not eroded and they're giving the most personalized experience to their best customers. And this has really worked well for them. It's generated really high levels of engagement with the loyalty program. And testament to that, I think, is the fact that their loyalty members have an 83% higher repurchase rate compared to non-members. And they're also higher than average in terms of annual purchase frequency. So from your loyal customers to those who aren't so loyal, over to Lisan now to tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I guess we're now on the last leg of our journey. We started, seeing how personas can help the whole customer journey, always being on top of personalization. Then we moved on to how do you make sure that your one-time buyer converts into good customers, then how do you make sure that the best customers get the best treatment? And now, sadly, we have to talk about that customers that we all know of, which is the customer at risk of churn at the end of the journey. So why do we want to talk about it? Because as per usual, we've got kind of like very striking numbers for you to look at. So the first piece of why do you even want to care about your churning customers? You know, after all, they don't like your brand anymore. I'm like, why would you even go after them? Well, it's because if you increase the retention by 5%, you will increase your profit by 125%. So it is definitely something that is worth the effort. You also know, like this is something that is very known in the industry, that it is 6.7 times more expensive to acquire new customers or to keep an old one. So another thing that should motivate you to try to keep those in a flight risk. And also something that we all know is that the top customers will account for most of the revenue. So there is that nice, 80-20 law of 80% of your revenue is going to come from the top 20% of existing customers. So again, underlying the existing piece of customers. So that means that you really want to take care of who you already have in your customer base. And I think Kat also has even more, striking data to support that conviction.
Yeah, so we just really wanted to understand if that's are still kind of holding true today. So at the end of last year, we surveyed marketers to understand where they're focusing their efforts. And we found that more than half of marketers are spending 60% or more of their efforts and time on acquisition. And this is despite the fact, as Liesl mentioned, that acquiring new customers is much more expensive. And also the success of converting an existing customer is much, much higher. So 60 to 70% versus 5 to 20% for a new customer. And we know that in the world of e-commerce, it might be even lower. So how can e-commerce brands recognize these important customers and really focus more on retention? I'm going to hand over to Liesl, who has a bit more on that.
Yeah, and I think before we dive in, we actually have another poll question. So we had a very good participation rate in the last one. So I hope we get the same here. And basically what we'd like to know from you guys is, if anything, do you already use something for churn prevention? So do you use a business rule saying everybody who hasn't purchased in the last 90 days gets an email? Do you use purchase-based predictive analytics, so things that are based on churn modeling? Do you use browse-based predictive analytics, things that are based on your behavior on the website? Do you use nothing, or maybe do you use something else? In case you use something else, I'd love to see a comment or a question pop in where somebody can tell us what it is. So we're gonna leave you a tiny bit more time to vote. I want the participation to go up so that all of you guys can actually give your opinion on that. Getting into the last 10 seconds of the voting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great, closing the poll. And let's see, so very interesting. We basically have a polarized answer to the poll. So we've got that the best answer was nothing. So I think it's very interesting here, and I'm sure that if you guys are watching, this is because maybe you're thinking of how can I actually go maybe from nothing to doing something with my churning customers. It seems that the business rule is the second most popular, and I have to say that these two results are not very surprising. This is typically what we see with retailers who tell us it's either really hard to do anything, so they're currently doing nothing, but they wish it would do something, or they have managed to actually build maybe one churn program, but we're only able to use business rules because this is, typically what you will have available in your CRM, etc. So interesting things here. So I'm happy to get to the next point, which will actually be talking about more of a purchase-based predictive analytics, solution for churn, which we think is very interesting and which we've seen work well for retailers in the past. So here, the idea is that we are trying to move away from the simple rule-based trigger, because as you all know, customers are quite different. So if you were to set up a trigger that said, hey, customers who haven't shopped in the last 50 days, their churn, let's send them something. As you can see with the example, some of the customers wouldn't truly be churned, and maybe you will be missing some of them. So the rule-based is good when you have, nothing else. It's still probably like your best educated guess to at which point are you supposed to be, reaching out to your customers to help them stay with the brand. But really, this is where the predictive analytics can come to the rescue and help you identify the right customer at the right moment, and really know when is that customer churning on their own personalized pattern. So, getting customer one after 45 days, because this is when that customer is in trouble, whereas getting customer 3 65 days after their last purchase, because this is when that customer will be in trouble, with the double benefit of talking to the right people at the right time, and also not making your customer used to seeing these "we miss you" message, and kind of like training them to only purchase when they see those arrive. So you're really kind of like sparingly talking with them at the right time. So yeah, how does that look in practice? So what you can do with a tool like Castora or tools that do predictive analytics, churn modeling, is that you can actually talk to these customers at the right time. If we're being super fancy, you can notice that we can also then layer on all of the other fancy segmentation we talked about at the beginning of webinar, and also make sure that we give a discount to who needs it, and make sure that maybe we personalize with some affinities and let them know about a product they like. So this will be a very supercharged customer journey at that point, where you really personalize and protect your margin and talk at the right moment to the right people.
Cool. So yeah, this kind of proactive approach to reducing churn, it can simply be around asking them why they become disengaged. And if you can recognize it early enough, it could even maybe be on your website. So for example, here you can see an example of a campaign that we ran with a bathroom retailer, and this was actually based on traffic source as well. So they wanted to understand why PPC traffic was leaving the website. But the same could be applied in a situation where the visitor is a churn risk, to understand why they haven't purchased in a while or what they might need help with. In this case, the brand discovered that 46% of customers actually prefer to shop by style. And so they could then apply this learning to how they merchandised for these visitors. And I think Lisan has another example of how this tactic can be applied for those customers who maybe haven't visited your website in a while.
Yeah, so what we have helped Eloqui do, they were doing exactly what Kat is saying. They were trying to get to the why of the churn. So on top of being able to identify who is churning, it's very interesting to know why. So they were trying to just get to people who were churned, who maybe were like, a year out in their purchases, and try to asking them, why did you churn? But the response rate was really low. So what we helped them doing was to actually identify the customers right before they churn. So right at the point where, their mindset was starting to change. And what resulted from that is a 10% response rate, which you can see is much higher than a 0.5% response rate that they started with. And that really helped Eloqui changing a Kalman feed based on the feedback, because most of the feedback that the customer gave was based on the feed of the clothes. So this is something that, paired with triggers based on predictive churn modeling, really helped the brand, because they had the why and then they were able to do the how.
Cool. And so if you have been successful with your kind of efforts to re-engage your churn risk users, and you've got them back to your site, so we've seen some really great results with reactivation campaigns for these users. Looking at our data, 36% of users returned to site after submitting their details in a Yieldify campaign. And so this could be something like reminding them of loyalty points if they're a program member, or even getting them to take that next step toward conversion basically by registering or sharing more details with you so that you can, again, build a richer profile and personalize their experience further. In the example above, this is just to re-engage a returning user, and it also helps broaden the types of data that we have on them. So you can see that there's different drop-downs there related to their skin types. And at the same time, the fact that it is a drop-down, it means that the data you're collecting is going to be error-free. And it's really easy for a user to complete as well. So there's, very little effort for them to share that data with you. And then I think that's nearly everything that we wanted to cover today. So I'm just going to hand over to Lisa for a few final points before we get into your questions later.
Great. So I hope that was interesting for all of you attendees. But as Kat was saying, what we really wanted you to kind of leave the webinar with in terms of thought is that kind of being convinced that predictive analytics plus personalization is really how you supercharge your customer journeys. And I hope that the examples we provided were helpful in that. And then what you might also want to remember is kind of how do you supercharge that journey? So if you think about the relationship you have over time with your customers, you really want to put your personas to work. You want to make every touch point something personalized and something meaningful for your customers. And then going down the road of the kind of customer journey from the onset, you want to boost your repeat purchases. You want to make sure to be consistent, build trust, and really know what will make a first-time buyer convert into a second time. Once you're in the good spot, in the sweet part of the relationship with your customer, you want to make your best customer better. So you really want to cultivate them, recognize why they are the best. First recognize who they are, and then reward them for being your best customer. And at the end of the road, finally, really trying to make sure that you are re-engaging these customers at risk of churn. They are super valuable. You need to understand why they are churning, and then you need to act, at a time frame that makes sense for all of your customers and make sure that they stay with you. Before we go on to the questions, we just had a shameless plug for some of our very cool content. We swear it's very interesting. So we'll be sending the recording of today's webinar. We'll also have it as a podcast, and you will also get some bonus content from your different Custora. And what you'll get from Custora will be the chance of a lifetime, which sounds very excited, or how to use customer lifetime value reporting to grow your retail business. So just a little bit more of food for your thoughts there.
Yeah, and we'll be sending around our personalization guide. So just more examples of how you can personalize the customer journey.
Great, so we do have a few minutes left. Is there any question on the attendee side, anything you wanted to ask us about?
We do have one question here, which is, which life cycle stage should I optimize for?
That's interesting. Maybe if we start from the insights perspective, I would say all of them. But really, to be a bit more serious, I think that depends on where is your company at. If you're a newer retailer and obviously your game is acquisition, you probably will want to spend a bit more time doing high value acquisition and maybe only later getting into the core cultivation and kind of going down the customer journey. If your brand is more, set and you kind of maybe have gotten already a lot of customers and you don't think that there are that many other customers out there to hunt, this is definitely where retention is going to be the name of the game and where you want to keep these people in. So I think the life cycle stage that you should optimize for is kind of really dependent on what is the life cycle stage of the company and kind of matching those.
I think this question is for Kat. What kinds of personalization work best?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is quite similar to the other question in that there's no sort of one size fits all answer. It really depends on a couple of different things. What data do you have available, and what do you actually want to do? It can be really hard to know where to start with personalization. So that's why we kind of have a service side to our business as well, because we have people who are experts in it, and we have a lot of data that we can then kind of recommend what to get started with. I think some of the most important things would be actually looking at those customer journeys on your website. So once you've identified your kind of high value segments that you want to target, look at how they are actually, using your website, and then also test. So A/B test your different personalizations so that you can kind of, once you've, identified the ones that are the highest priority, then you can just keep optimizing them and make sure that they're driving sort of the best return for you as well.
Cool. And one last question. How do you recognize where in the customer journey to personalize?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. Again, I think it really involves just that analysis piece. Obviously, what Castora does plays into that a lot as well. Just pinpointing those audiences and also the areas for improvement on their journeys. I would say, just from like the personalization perspective, what we've seen is that multiple touch points when it comes to personalization can be a lot more effective. So not just personalizing one part of the customer journey, actually showing sort of multiple different messages as someone kind of makes their way through the funnel. But it's really just about identifying, how many messages is going to be optimal for you. And again, that comes down to sort of testing and learning.
Cool. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you got something out of it. And we will be sending the recording out later today or early tomorrow. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.